The crack of a palm against flesh echoed through the grand ballroom, but the blood drawn didn't belong to the intended target. A clumsy, heavy-set maid had just thrown her body in front of the city's most feared mafia matriarch. What followed wasn't just revenge. It was an absolute massacre. Skylar Gallagher was not built for the invisible, effortless grace expected of high society household staff. At 240 pounds, she took up space in a world that preferred its servants to be unseen shadows. Her thick thighs chafed under the stiff, unforgiving black fabric of her uniform, and the white apron strings always struggled to tie into a neat, delicate bow across her wide waist. She bumped into door frames. She rattled the imported fine china. Her heavy, hurried footsteps announced her arrival long before she even entered a room. In the pristine, aggressively polished marble halls of the Rossi family estate in upstate New York, Skylar, known to everyone simply as Penny, was a walking liability. She knew they laughed at her. The other maids, thin and graceful, snickered in the kitchens when she had to pause and catch her breath after carrying laundry up 3 flights of stairs. The armed guards stationed at the perimeter often made crude bets on how many pastries she snuck from the pantry. But Penny endured it. She endured the sweating, the aching joints, and the cruel whispers because the pay at the Rossi estate was double what any legal corporation would offer, and her father's dialysis treatments weren't going to pay for themselves. The Rossi syndicate was not a family of petty criminals. They were a sophisticated, ruthless enterprise disguised as real estate tycoons and shipping magnates. At the helm was Dominic Rossi. Dominic was 32, carved from granite and cold calculation. He had inherited the empire 5 years ago, after his father's violent passing, and under his rule, the family had become untouchable. He was a man of few words and terrifying action. When Dominic walked into a room, the temperature seemed to plummet. Men stopped breathing. Women lowered their eyes. He demanded perfection silence and absolute loyalty. By all logic, a clumsy, fat, anxious maid like Penny should have been fired on her first day. In fact, she had nearly been fired her first week after dropping a silver tray of champagne flutes right outside Dominic's private study. But Penny had a singular, powerful guardian in the house, Carmela Rossi. Carmela was Dominic's mother, the aging, elegant matriarch of the family. To the outside world, Carmela was a sharp-tongued, untouchable widow, but behind the closed doors of the estate, she was a fragile woman, terrified of her own fading mind. She was in the early stages of dementia, a secret guarded so fiercely that even Dominic didn't fully grasp the extent of her decline. He knew she was getting older, perhaps a bit forgetful, but Carmela masked her symptoms with the skill of a lifelong mafia wife. It was Penny who truly knew. Penny was the one who found Carmela wandering the vast rose gardens at 3 a.m. in her nightgown, shivering and looking for a dog that had died 20 years ago. It was Penny who gently, quietly wrapped her own thick wool sweater around the older woman's frail shoulders, speaking in soft, grounding tones, and guided her back to bed without alerting the guards. It was Penny who subtly rearranged Carmela's medication so she wouldn't forget to take it, and Penny who whispered the names of visiting dignitaries into Carmela's ear. When the matriarch's eyes went blank with panic. Carmela loved the heavy-set girl. She didn't care that Penny knocked over the occasional vase or that she sweat through her collar during dinner service. "You have a good heart, Skylar," Carmela had murmured one afternoon, her frail hand resting on Penny's plump, dimpled wrist. "A real heart, not like these jackals that surround my son. Never let them make you feel small just because you are big." Penny had blinked back tears that day, vowing a silent, fierce loyalty to the old woman. She would take a bullet for Carmela Rossi. She just never expected that she would actually have to throw herself into the line of fire. The incident occurred in late November, during the most critical evening of Dominic's career. The Rossi family was hosting the Moretti Syndicate. The gathering was masked as a lavish holiday charity gala, but every made man in the room knew it was a summit to forge a blood alliance. The treaty was to be cemented by an arranged marriage between Dominic Rossi and Bianca Moretti, the spoiled, vicious daughter of the rival boss. The atmosphere in the grand ballroom was suffocating. The air was thick with the scent of expensive Cuban cigars, heavy floral perfumes, and underlying primal danger. Waiters wove seamlessly through the crowd of mobsters and politicians. Penny was sweating profusely. Her face was flushed, her feet screaming in agony inside her sensible black shoes as she navigated the crowded room carrying a heavy tray of caviar hors d'oeuvres. She kept her head down, trying to make herself as small as a 240-pound woman could. Through the crowd, she spotted Bianca Moretti. Bianca was striking with sleek, dark hair, razor-sharp cheekbones, and a lithe, model-thin figure draped in a skin-tight white designer gown that cost more than Penny's entire life insurance policy. She was clutching a crystal glass of red wine, holding court with a group of sycophants. As Penny squeezed past her, a guest bumped into Penny's broad shoulder. Penny stumbled her hip, grazing Bianca's chair. "Watch it, you clumsy cow!" Bianca hissed, her dark eyes flashing with unfiltered disgust as she looked Penny up and down. "Or are you trying to eat the appetizers before they reach the guests?" A few of the men nearby chuckled. Penny's face burned a deep, humiliating crimson. "I'm so sorry, Miss Moretti," she mumbled, bowing her head and rushing away as fast as her aching legs could carry her. As she retreated, Penny scanned the room for Carmela. The matriarch was supposed to be seated at the head table, but her chair was empty. Panic flared in Penny's chest. The ballroom was entirely too loud, the flashing lights of the hired photographers too bright. It was exactly the kind of environment that triggered Carmela's confusion. Setting her tray down on a side table, Penny slipped out of the ballroom, her heavy footsteps muffled by the thick Persian runners in the quiet, dim hallways of the estate's east wing. She checked the library. Empty. She checked the drawing room. Empty. Finally, she hurried toward the conservatory, a glass-walled room filled with exotic plants at the very edge of the house. As Penny neared the heavy oak doors, she heard voices. One was frail and distressed. The other was sharp, arrogant, and vicious. "You really think you're going to keep running his life?" Bianca Moretti's voice dripped with venom. Penny pressed herself against the wall, peering through the crack in the door. Inside the dimly lit conservatory, Carmela Rossi was backed against a wrought-iron table. She looked disoriented, her hands trembling as she clutched a silk shawl. Bianca stood over her, the glass of red wine still in her hand. "Dominic is marrying me," Bianca sneered, taking a step closer to the elderly woman. "Which means this house is mine. He is mine. I'm not going to play second fiddle to a senile old bat who doesn't even know what year it is. After the ring is on my finger, I'm putting you in a home, Carmela. One far, far away." Dominic wouldn't allow that," Carmela stammered, her eyes wide, with a heartbreaking confusion. "My son. He loves me. You are a wicked girl." "Your son is a businessman," Bianca snapped. "And you are a liability." Carmela, frightened and trying to create distance, stepped away. As she did, her trembling hand caught the edge of a large, potted fern. She stumbled forward, her arm instinctively flying out to catch her balance. Her hand collided with Bianca's wine glass. The dark red liquid splashed violently over the front of Bianca's pristine, expensive white gown, looking like a fresh blood stain. For a second, the conservatory was dead silent. Bianca looked down at her ruined dress, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unhinged rage. "You stupid, rotting old bitch!" she shrieked. Bianca raised her right hand. On her ring finger sat a massive, heavy platinum ring, jagged with diamonds. She swung her arm back, with full vicious force, aiming directly for Carmela's frail, wrinkled face. Penny didn't think. The self-preservation instincts of a lifetime vanished. With a desperate gasp, Penny lunged through the heavy doors. Her foot caught the edge of the brass threshold, and she stumbled her massive frame, propelling forward like a falling boulder. She didn't have time to stop the swing, but she had just enough time to throw her broad body between the furious mafia princess and the terrified mother. Crack! The sound was sickeningly loud. Bianca's palm and the jagged diamond ring connected with Penny's cheekbone with the force of a speeding truck. The impact snapped Penny's head violently to the side. The heavy platinum tore through the soft, plump flesh of Penny's face, ripping a gash from her cheek down to her jaw. Penny collapsed to the cold tile floor with a heavy thud, gasping in shock and agony. Blood immediately poured from her face, thick and hot, pooling on the white apron stretched over her stomach. "Penny!" Carmela screamed, dropping to her knees, despite her brittle bones, her hands hovering over the bleeding maid. "Oh my God, Skylar, my sweet girl." Bianca stood over them, chest heaving, nursing her stinging hand. She looked down at the bleeding, overweight maid with absolute revulsion. "Look what you made me do." Bianca spat at Carmela before kicking Penny's thigh with her sharp stiletto. "Get out of my way, you fat, bleeding pig. You ruined my dress. Is there a problem here?" The voice came from the doorway. It was not loud. It was not shouting. But it was so cold, so devoid of human warmth, that it caused the very air in the conservatory to freeze. Bianca spun around, the arrogant sneer instantly sliding off her face. Dominic Rossi stood in the doorway. Behind him, two of his most lethal enforcers stood in total silence. Dominic's dark eyes swept the room. They bypassed his fiancée in her wine-stained dress. They bypassed the shattered crystal on the floor. His eyes locked onto his elderly mother, kneeling on the floor and sobbing in terror. And then his gaze shifted to the massive Clumsy Maid, lying on the tiles, shielding his mother's body with her own, her face torn open and bleeding profusely onto the floor of his home. "Dominic, darling." Bianca started her voice, suddenly trembling as she tried to adopt a tone of victimhood. "Your mother, she lost her mind. She threw wine on me, and this disgusting fat maid charged at me." Dominic raised a single finger. Bianca's jaw snapped shut. Dominic slowly unbuttoned his suit jacket, stepping into the conservatory. The silence was deafening, save for Penny's ragged, pained breathing. The Mafia Boss walked past Bianca, as if she were a ghost dropping to one knee beside the bleeding maid and his weeping mother. He pulled a pristine silk handkerchief from his breast pocket and gently, with shocking tenderness, pressed it against Penny's profusely bleeding cheek. Penny flinched, tears of pain mixing with the blood, looking up at the terrifying Don with wide, terrified eyes. "She tried to hit me, Dom." Carmela sobbed, clinging to her son's broad shoulder. "The girl, Bianca, she tried to strike me. Skylar jumped in the way. She saved me, Dominic. She saved me." Dominic's jaw ticked. A single, barely perceptible muscle fluttered near his temple. He looked into Penny's tear-filled, pain-clouded eyes. "Is this true, Skylar?" Dominic asked, his voice a low, gravelly whisper, meant only for her. Penny, too, terrified to speak, simply gave a small, jerky nod, wincing as the movement tore at her split skin. Dominic kept his hand firmly on the handkerchief against her cheek. He turned his head slowly, looking over his shoulder at Bianca Moretti. The look in his eyes was not anger. It was a dark, bottomless abyss of absolute ruin. Dominic, listen to me. Bianca pleaded, her voice, a shrill, grating sound that shattered the tense quiet of the conservatory. She took a step toward him, her stiletto heels clicking sharply against the imported Italian tile. She is just a maid, a clumsy, fat maid who ruined a custom-made gown that cost more than she makes in a decade. You cannot possibly be angry with me for disciplining the hired help when she attacked me. Dominic Rossi did not rise from the floor. He remained kneeling, the silk handkerchief rapidly turning a deep, saturated crimson as it absorbed the blood from Schuyler's torn cheek. The massive woman lay trembling, her breathing shallow, and ragged, her eyes rolling back slightly from the sheer shock of the impact. Dominic's expression remained utterly unreadable, a terrifying mask of stoic calm that his enemies knew preceded absolute devastation. He looked at his enforcers, two towering men who stood like statues in the doorway. "Call Dr. Jonathan Hayes at Mount Sinai Hospital." Dominic commanded his voice, barely rising above a whisper, yet carrying the weight of an executioner's gavel. "Tell him to prepare a private trauma suite immediately, and get the armored SUV to the east wing doors. Now." One of the enforcers nodded once and vanished down the hallway. "Dominic," Bianca snapped, losing her carefully crafted composure as panic set in. She was the daughter of Lorenzo Moretti. She was not used to being ignored, let alone dismissed in favor of a bleeding servant. "Are you deaf? I am your fiancé. You are disrespecting my family by coddling this disgusting pig." Dominic slowly stood up. He left the blood-soaked handkerchief in his mother's trembling hands, gently guiding Carmela to press it against Penny's face. Then he turned to face Bianca. The temperature in the room plummeted. The silence was so profound that the soft weeping of the elderly matriarch echoed like a siren. He closed the distance between them in 3 long, deliberate strides. Bianca instinctively shrank back, her bravado evaporating, as she met the hollow, dead gaze of the Rossi boss. "The engagement is broken." Dominic stated his tone, devoid of any emotion. It was a simple recitation of a new reality. Bianca gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, the jagged platinum ring catching the dim light. "You cannot do that. My father will kill you. He will wage war on your entire syndicate. A blood treaty cannot be broken over a fat, stupid maid." "It is already broken," Dominic replied softly. He leaned in slightly, his face inches from hers. The scent of her expensive perfume, mixed with the spilled wine, disgusted him. "You raised your hand to my mother. You struck a woman who is under my protection. You will leave this estate within 60 seconds. Or you will not leave it breathing." Tears of fury and humiliation welled in Bianca's eyes. She opened her mouth to scream, to threaten to curse him, but the second enforcer stepped forward, his hand resting casually on the grip of the pistol, holstered under his tailored jacket. Bianca swallowed her venom, hitching up her ruined skirt, and stormed out of the conservatory, her heels echoing like frantic gunshots down the hall. Within minutes, the quiet conservatory transformed into a frantic triage center. Dominic himself lifted Schuyler from the cold floor. Despite her heavy weight, the mob boss carried her broad, limp body with effortless strength, ignoring the blood that stained his pristine white shirt and ruined his bespoke tuxedo jacket. He laid her gently in the back of the armored SUV, his mother insisting on riding alongside them, clutching Penny's thick, clammy hand the entire frantic drive through the darkened streets of New York City. When they arrived at the private, heavily guarded wing of Mount Sinai, Dr. Jonathan Hayes was waiting. Penny was rushed into surgery to repair the severe laceration on her face, but minutes into the procedure, the situation spiraled into chaos. Dominic was pacing the sterile waiting room, comforting his distraught mother, when Dr. Hayes burst through the double doors. his surgical mask pulled down his eyes, wide with urgency. "Mr. Rossi." The doctor breathed heavily. "The laceration is deep, but that is not the primary concern. Skylar is seizing. Her heart rate is wildly erratic, and her throat is closing. She is exhibiting signs of acute, rapid-onset neurotoxicity." Dominic froze. "Poison?" "Yes," Dr. Hayes confirmed quickly. "A synthetic, fast-acting agent. It entered her bloodstream directly through the open wound on her cheek. We are administering broad-spectrum antidotes, but her weight is actually slowing the circulation of the toxin, which might be the only reason she isn't already dead." The pieces clicked together in Dominic's mind with terrifying clarity. The anchor's jagged platinum ring, the arranged marriage, the sudden unprovoked hostility toward his fragile mother. The Moretti family had never intended to honor the peace treaty. The marriage was a Trojan horse. The ring was laced with a synthetic, untraceable neurotoxin meant to scratch Dominic during an intimate moment, inducing a fatal heart attack that would leave Bianca as the grieving widow in control of the Rossi empire. Penny hadn't just saved Carmela from a humiliating slap. The clumsy, heavy-set maid had thrown her body into a trap designed to assassinate the matriarch, or the boss himself. By taking that strike to her face, Skylar Gallagher had absorbed the poison meant for the Rossi bloodline. A dark, volcanic rage ignited in Dominic's chest. It was a fury so absolute, so consuming, that it transcended mere anger. The Morettis had weaponized his mother's illness. They had mocked and nearly murdered the only truly innocent soul in his violent world. Dominic pulled out his encrypted phone. He dialed his underboss, cancelled the charity gala. Dominic ordered smoothly, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Lock down the ballroom. No one leaves. Seize Lorenzo Moretti and prepare the men. We are going to war tonight." The revenge that followed was not a simple, bloody shootout. Dominic Rossi was a master of psychological warfare and absolute ruin. He did not merely want Lorenzo and Bianca Moretti dead. He wanted them erased from the earth, stripped of their pride, their wealth, and their legacy. While Dr. Hayes fought through the night to stabilize Skylar's failing organs, Dominic's enforcers executed a flawlessly coordinated massacre across the city. Within 4 hours, the Moretti family's illicit shipping warehouses in Brooklyn were burning to the ground. Their offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands were systematically hacked and drained by Rossi cyber specialists. The billions of dollars vanished into thin air. Every corrupt politician, police commissioner, and judge on Lorenzo Moretti's payroll received a terrifyingly simple message: cut ties or burn with them. Lorenzo Moretti, a man who had commanded fear for 3 decades, found himself chained to a steel chair in the soundproof basement of his own seized meatpacking plant. Bianca, her white dress now stiff with dried wine and grime, was weeping hysterically in the corner of the freezing room. The heavy metal door groaned open. Dominic walked in, dressed in a fresh, perfectly tailored black suit, completely devoid of the blood from earlier that evening. He pulled up a chair and sat directly across from Lorenzo. "You broke the code, Lorenzo," Dominic said softly, the silence of the room amplifying his deadly tone. "You used a poisoned ring. You targeted my mother. But your greatest mistake was underestimating the woman who took the blow. She was just a fat, meaningless servant," Bianca shrieked from the corner, shivering violently. "You destroyed our empire over a nobody." Dominic did not even look at her. He kept his eyes locked on Lorenzo. "That nobody possesses more loyalty, more courage, and more worth than your entire bloodline. She took a strike meant to kill. She saved my mother's life. She saved my life. Dominic stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. You wanted to take my empire, Lorenzo. Now you have nothing. No money. No allies. No soldiers. I will let you live, but you will live on the streets you used to own, begging for scraps. If you or your daughter ever approach my family again, I will not be as merciful as I am being right now. He turned and walked out, leaving the former mob boss and his spoiled daughter to the brutal, unforgiving reality of their complete destruction. True to his word, Dominic ensured they were blacklisted from every criminal and legitimate enterprise in the country. The mighty Morettis were reduced to impoverished ghosts, terrified of their own shadows. 3 weeks later, the winter sun filtered softly through the large, bulletproof windows of a private recovery suite at the Rossi estate. The room smelled of fresh lilies and expensive essential oils. Skylar Gallagher lay in the center of the plush, king-sized bed, surrounded by silk pillows. Her face was heavily bandaged, a stark white patch covering the deep, healing laceration on her cheek. She was still weak, her large body aching from the lingering effects of the neurotoxin. But she was alive. The heavy oak door creaked open, and Dominic stepped inside. He carried a silk tray holding a steaming cup of Earl Grey tea and a small plate of delicate pastries. Penny tried to sit up, her cheeks flushing a deep, embarrassed pink. She was acutely aware of her size, her messy hair, and the fact that the most dangerous man on the eastern seaboard was serving her tea. "Please, Mr. Rossi, you shouldn't be doing that," Penny stammered, reaching for the tray with trembling, thick fingers. "I'm the maid. I should be." "You are not a maid." Dominic interrupted, firmly placing the tray gently on her lap. He sat on the edge of the bed, his dark eyes softening as he looked at her bandaged face. "You haven't been a maid since the moment you threw yourself in front of my mother. You are family now, Skylar." Penny's breath hitched. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over her uninjured cheek. I just didn't want her to get hurt. She's so kind to me. She doesn't see me as just the clumsy, fat girl." Dominic reached out his large, calloused hand, gently brushing a stray lock of hair away from her forehead. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to Penny's heart. "No one in this house will ever view you as anything less than royalty." Dominic murmured, his voice possessing a strange, hypnotic warmth that no one outside this room had ever heard. "I have paid off your father's medical debts, his dialysis, his mortgage, his retirement. It is all handled. You will have a permanent suite in this estate. You will have a custom wardrobe crafted by the finest designers in Milan who will appreciate your beauty, not hide it. You will never lift a tray scrubber floor or lower your head to anyone ever again." Penny sobbed openly now, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of his words. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Dominic leaned closer. He looked past her bandages, past her size, past her insecurities, and saw the absolute, terrifying beauty of a soul completely pure. In a world built on deceit, blood, and betrayal, this clumsy, heavy-set woman was the only real thing he had ever encountered. "Because, Skylar," Dominic said, his lips brushing softly against her uninjured cheek, igniting a slow-burning, undeniable romance that would forever alter the history of the Rossi Syndicate. "You shielded my mother. You saved my empire. And in return, I am going to shield you from the rest of the world." The Clumsy Maid had taken a slap, meant for a mafia queen, and in the unbelievable aftermath of blood poison and ruin, she had unknowingly inherited the throne. Did you love this thrilling mafia romance? The loyalty of a humble maid and the ruthless revenge of a powerful boss prove that true strength comes from the heart. If you want to hear more incredible dramatic stories of betrayal, unexpected love, and unbelievable vengeance, please click the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel right now. Hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our daily, real-life storytelling adventures. Stay tuned.